Two Writers Talking Shit.
That's right.
We are back.
With another episode.
Another episode and an amazing manager here from Bellevue, John Zaozirny. And yeah, man, let's get into it. The manager episodes do the best. Zach Zucker.
Oh yeah, you're telling me about this in Austin.
Yeah, he has the most.
I gotta beat his numbers.
You gotta beat his numbers, man. So let's just dive into the water, which is when writers, like recently I've been talking to a lot of upcoming writers, and is now a good time to reach out to managers to be rep per se,
as opposed to when exactly.
Exactly. So my point is it ever a good time? Like
right. I would say the only bad times would be during like the winter vacation, like I which does not stop some people. I got query emails on Christmas, on New Year's. By the way, I don't know if you remember the site, but I like complained about someone sending me a query letter on Christmas, and I got viciously attacked by a bunch of people on Twitter.
No way.
Yeah, they were like, "How dare you? Maybe they don't know. Maybe that's the only day of the year they can send you a query.
What?
You've destroyed writers' spirits." And I was like, okay. Some people,
don't
whatever.
send on Christmas, y'all. That's
exactly.
ridiculous.
To me, that seems somewhat, easy advice to give. But, maybe avoid the weekends. I would say,
office hours. Stick to the office hours.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't mind if I get a query letter like later in the day. I mean, the time zone thing or whatever, like that doesn't bother me. I mean, I'm not like offended, but it just is one of those things. Like, when would you want someone to reach out to you about a potential work thing?
That's a good point.
And there's also this amazing thing called schedule send, which means you can send an email whatever time. I write a lot of emails at midnight that go out at 8 a.m. the next day.
Yeah.
So, but beyond that, I think what you're asking about are larger kind of institutional or infrastructural kind of, industry things. I mean, there's just no good time, right? And there's no bad time, which is weird to say. I mean, that's not true. There are times that are more difficult than others, but that's through you have no control over that, right?
Like the strike, for example. Did you get queries during the strike?
I did. Not a lot. I think there was a feeling out there that you couldn't reach out to managers, which to my understanding was inaccurate. The WJ, there's no issue with reaching out to manager, whether you're in the WJ or not. Yeah. Now, we didn't take out material. That was verboten, which is totally understandable and fine, but you could absolutely reach out to reps. It doesn't make sense. I mean, but some people felt like that. And I would say the number, I got the least queries ever during the strike, Something people were a little fuzzy on the rules, and nobody wanted to cross a line or be seen as a scab or, unintentionally get themselves in trouble with the WJ. But we can talk about the moment in time right now, which is, I think it's so funny. I feel like I've been saying this for a long time. It's as hard as it's ever been. Yeah. I would say it's as hard as it's ever been on the TV side, which is kind of crazy considering that for maybe the last 8 years, maybe even 10 years, the TV side has really been the boom. I remember when I was in film school, it was really like film was the focus and TV wasn't, and then that's because I went to film school like in like the early 2000s, late 90s, and then obviously at a certain point when I started going to film schools to like meet, to talk to people or potentially sign people or whatever, it had very much swung, and people were more focused on TV than features because there were more opportunities there. I do think the pendulum. Tricky because Saeed is a TV writer and also is a client at my company.
Keep it. No, we want the
but I think it's as hard as it's ever been for TV writers. I think if you're established, such as Saeed, I think it's going to be easier to survive or get through, just in the sense of like you are an established name, you've staffed before, people know who you are. I do think, and this is just what I'm hearing anecdotally, but that the rooms are getting smaller and they're getting more inclined towards mid-level and up writers. The feeling being, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I don't set the marketplace, but I just have to listen to it and figure out how to guide my clients through it. The feeling being that if you're having fewer writers, then you want people who are already established. When I was at Austin, I'm blanking on his name, but this, really well established, successful, very smart TV writer who, Jonathan, Fusco. I can't remember his name. John, who was did Animal Kingdom, the TV show, was on Yellow Jackets. Jonathan Lisco.
Yeah.
He had said that he's like, "Are you in a?" I believe he said this, and if not, it's a very I'm attributing it to him. Yes, he is saying, you have to figure out the TV show you're on is a working hospital or a teaching hospital. A teaching hospital where, if you're an up-and-coming writer, they're going to guide you and bring you along. Where a working hospital, they don't have time for that. It's all hands on deck, you got to learn as you go. And I think, if you're running a working hospital in that, to use that metaphor, there's just no time to get people. You've never produced an episode, we don't have time to teach you how to do that. You've never written an episode before, we don't have time to teach you to do that. I think that's unfortunate for a lot of reasons, but I also have to react to the marketplace and be aware of that. I do think for me, and I think, I've kind of talked with other managers and other agents, there's less of a focus on up and coming writers, because I have up and coming writers. I've already, if I am working with a client, I feel like I've made a promise to them to work as hard as I can to get them staffed, and I can only take on so many people at that level who've never staffed before, because I've got to there's going to be not a lot of opportunities, and I want to focus on the people that I already have signed. So unless I read a pilot and just blows, I'm still reading people, but the bar is higher than it's ever been, and so I do think it's undoubtedly that there's going to be less TV opportunities going forward, and as a result, I think there's going to be more of a focus on people who are already established. And so, there's just going to be less opportunities, and you kind of have to adjust to that reality. On the feature side, it feels like maybe there's more opportunities, or at least the diminishment has not hit them as hard, because streamers were not making as, when you're thinking of like Disney Plus, or you're thinking of Netflix or Hulu, you're thinking mostly of TV shows. You're not thinking as much about movies. They do make movies, but it doesn't feel like there was as much of a focus necessarily. It also doesn't feel like there's as much of a focus at necessarily pulling back. There will be less movies made by the streamers, but I don't think the deficit will be as dramatic as it is in the TV side. So, I would say it is one of those times where, features are coming back a little bit,
That's cool.
And that'll be interesting to see how that kind of ripples out into the marketplace.
That's dope.
I mean, that's actually one of our questions. Like, what is the appetite on like the spec market? So that's feature film specs for anybody who isn't unfamiliar with the term. Does it feel like people are buying? Like, what are they hungry for? What are they interested in?
I mean, the truth is, we don't know yet. I'm taking out I've taken out a few specs so far. I'm taking out kind of a big one as well on Monday, and we'll know, because it's just to give, when we're taping this right as Sundance is coming to an end. Traditionally, you don't take out feature specs in January that often. Occasionally, you do kind of maybe earlier in the month, or if they're not really Sundance-oriented stuff. We took out one that was kind of a big sci-fi action thing. But you tend to take them post Sundance, because you just don't want to worry about executives already being out of town. And so we'll really see. I don't think there's been a ton of spec sales. There's been package sales, actress, a direct, A-list actress, A-list director, script from A-list person, or what it's like. Matt Damon, Ben Affleck directing Matt Damon in a screenplay, rewritten by Billy Ray, from a writer who's more up and coming, but still okay, that's going to sell, it's just a matter of to who and how much, the pure spec, I haven't seen yet. I have some scripts I'm taking out that I'm really, really excited about. I don't really know. I actually was talking to someone, a client on Friday, and they're like, "Oh, when are you gonna take out my kind of smaller horror-oriented script?" And I was like, I don't know, because I don't know what the marketplace is going to be like. If the marketplace is really, really flooded with material, if the executives are taking home 20, 30 scripts a weekend, I might hold on your script till later in the year, till April, May, once I feel like that kind of wave is maybe died down slightly, because they're gonna, a smaller horror film might not jump out as much as a really loud, high-concept film might, kind of the more studio-oriented, more commercial material, because it's commercial in the sense of being a bigger budget, slam dunk, kind of thing. So the scripts that are a little smaller, a little more indie oriented, you're probably going to hold those so they don't get drowned out by the volume of material that theoretically could be coming out. because, you know, I mean, I can speak for myself as a company. We didn't take out very many scripts last year.
Right.
Because, you know, the strike hit in, what was it, May 1st, I want to say?
Yeah.
But then even before then, you weren't taking out specs in April, really, because if you're like, okay, take a script out in April, takes a week or two for people to read, maybe an offer comes in mid to late April, or we can get the deal done by May 1st.
Right.
Because like that's that, right? You can't. I think you
because those are frozen,
right?
Like I had a deal that was actually in contract status that was froze.
You know how it is, yeah. So like you're not aiming to do that. So really, the window for taking out specs and remember the Sundance thing was February, March of last year. Then the strike is over late September. So then you have October. To some degree, November. November's always tricky because you're getting near Thanksgiving. Again, another dead zone.
Yep.
And so, you know, anecdotally, also, I don't think there were a ton of specs written during the strike.
Not at all.
There were a few, but not a ton.
Writers were depressed.
I know. We talked about
I think
that.
the uncertainty, the lack of a deadline, honestly, I think.
Totally.
And how long it went. I think we all thought it would be like a couple months. Not you.
My prediction had always been to Labor Day, and in fact, it actually went beyond Labor Day, which cost me. I have to go buy another manager dinner now. Because although to be fair, he was talking like December, and I was like, "There's no way."
So it's a half dinner because he was wrong too. But
that wasn't part of the bet. That he was smart enough not to. He was basically like this or that, and even though I feel like I was closest to the pin, you know, it's like what is it like? Price is Right. Rules, you're over, you know. But yeah, so you know. The question really is if did people write specs post strike,
right?
And are those ready to go? So we're going to see what the marketplace is like. So the answer to your question is I don't know yet. I'm hoping that it's back, but it really remains to be seen.
Yeah, that's smart. I mean, I heard that also. I heard that like a lot of people held their scripts and
we were doing that. We held stuff that we did have that was done.
Yeah.
We held. You know, November, December, because you're just like, well, what we had kind of heard was that, and this was true in the TV space as well, and features and TV, was that, you know, maybe a third of the buyers were kind of offline trying to figure out what they wanted to do or whatever. And so you could take something out, but why take something into a diminished marketplace? You know, they're like, oh, Amazon's really buying. Well, cool, like Hulu's not, you know? So I'd rather go out and have 10 potential buyers, just pull up a random number, than 7. That's just, it's just better odds, you know? So yeah, we'll see what happens.
What about the rom-com? Because that's something that people keep asking about. And I noticed, like, I saw some. I was gonna pull it up on my phone, but I think the Sydney Sweeney,
Anyone But You, my friend
did well actually.
It did. Well, it was my friend Maya. That's her movie over at Sony. She's the executive on it, and then
I heard it did like 80 million or something.
It's
like,
still going. Alyssa Ullman produced it. And so a lot of friends who were involved in that movie, and it's been really amazing to see it. Open, you know, but I
mean, better than they thought. Like, I mean, it's, you know,
it opened slightly better than they thought, but it wasn't. I think it did like 8 or something. Which like no one's like, oh my god, it opened to 8. You know, you'd have to go to double digits for people to start paying attention. But then it stayed and it pulled up to number 1 eventually.
Well, apparently, like, it was like Gen Z and Gen Alpha went to TikTok and like created like a complete fervor for it, and like that's what's allegedly like driven ticket sales.
I mean, I can't believe that that's the only thing necessarily, because if that was true, then Saltburn would be still playing around the world, right? Because Murder the Dance Floor was so huge. What it kind of came, I don't know if you knew that, but like Saltburn has propelled Murder the Dance Floor to like being back in like the number 1 spot on Spotify for viral chart. It's
for the song.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, they did that for this unwritten song that's in Anyone But You. But I mean, you also just got chalked up to like that's a movie. I mean, like what comes of that? I think it's great for Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell if you're involved in their careers. It's great for Will Gluck. Does it mean that rom-coms are back? It's hard to say. I mean, when you, I think what's tricky is when we're like, oh yeah, there's this rom-com and it went viral. People are like, okay, well we have another rom-com. Is that going to go viral? Do things have to go viral? And so I think it's not a bad thing for rom-coms, but the reality is that they just haven't been. If my client had an amazing idea for one, great. But I think they are really hard unless they are packaged with
talent,
true movie stars.
I mean, that's what this is an example of.
I mean, they were up and comers at the time, so I think it was a relatively inexpensive bet to make. Yeah. I'm talking more like Ticket to Paradise, where it's Julia Roberts,
like George Clooney,
or Sandra Bullock, Channing Tatum, Love City kind of stuff. You know, that's more what I'm thinking. Is you're like, oh, we have, you know, these two amazing established movie stars, and then it's probably maybe even then a streaming play. You know, so.
And to the upcoming writers out there, we're not saying you have to write this, because I know the internet goes crazy. Twitter goes crazy whenever we ever talk about genres and stuff. Like, we're not saying to follow these genres, right? But we're saying if you're a comedy writer, and because I feel like all this shit goes in cycles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, you might as well, like, if you have, like you said, if you have a great rom-com idea, write it, hold it. If it ain't the time, like, you know what I'm saying, until it comes back.
I don't think you even need to hold it. I think you go out with it. And like, there's a movie coming out called Ricky Stanicky.
Yeah,
that script is a hilarious script. But it's been around
what's
since...
it called?
Ricky
Stanicky. It's John Cena, Zac Efron.
Yeah.
And it's got one of the best, cleanest comedy concepts I've ever heard in my entire life, which is this group of guys, whenever anything goes bad, they blame their friend Ricky Stanicky, who does not exist.
Okay.
And they're like, oh, babe, we have to go help Ricky. He's like in the hospital so they can go to the Super Bowl or whatever.
That's like their out card.
And then they get in trouble and they're like, we know Ricky's not real. Yeah. And so they have to hire a guy to play Ricky. So you're already laughing.
Hilarious, yeah.
But
it's not like that's such an 80s vibe.
Well, it's sold in 2010.
Oh,
okay.
When comedy was still, I want to say 2010, 2012, when comedy was still a really big thing.
It was still funny.
Well,
not like now where comedy just makes you cry.
Right. And so that the fact that it's just coming out now gives you an idea of how even during the boom, or if you have a great script will out, I truly do believe that.
Yeah.
But you know, it can take longer than you necessarily expect. So people should always, what I view my job as a manager is not to tell people not to do things. I mean, like if someone has written something patently offensive, then yes.
Yeah.
But like, not to tell people, hey, you can't write a $200 million Western starring teenagers, but I'd be like, hey, Westerns are hard, $200 million movies are hard, and there's not many teenage movie stars.
Yeah.
So you've made it really, really difficult for yourself. What I would say is the things that I feel like people are really looking for, other than some, you know, the theoretical big IP, which no one's going to get their hands on.
No. Not any new writer.
Well, yeah, and all, but I mean, like, is high concept sci-fi, action, or horror. Okay. People want their talk to me.
Yeah.
You know, people say they want their barbarian, although I suspect if they got their barbarian, they wouldn't know what to do with it. But they want their smile. Yeah. You know? Yeah. They want that cool, you know, Palm Springs gets talked about a lot, you know?
That was a comedy kind of... that was a... like,
kind of a
rom-com.
It repeated over and over. Time looper. Yeah.
Time loop movies.
Which is an old trope.
Oldish, but
Groundhog Day. Yeah, classic.
Yeah.
Classic trope.
Right. So, I love my time loop movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things where... but that is the thing people are looking for. If you were to ask me straight up, what are you looking for? Look, I have always been a genre person. I've produced a number of horror films.
Sure.
I rep a lot of horror writers. Yeah. I'm always looking for horror and genre, and especially high concept, which I would define as like, you know, my client, Chris Thomas Devlin, wrote a original script called Video Nasty, which is very much in the vein of like Jumanji, but for horror films, essentially. That's the kind of stuff, you know, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about, you know, where it's like, oh, big idea, you know, immediately like talk to me, you know, although I would say the interesting thing about talk to me is I think the idea is somewhat familiar, which is cursed object, but the execution of it was so stupendous. But, you know, horror, if you look at the box office, you know, it remains as such a really, it doesn't cost a lot typically because it's not very movie star driven necessarily. It doesn't cost a lot and it tends to generate a pretty good return. You know, I would say the one tricky thing about horror is that it's seen as somewhat lowbrow. Yeah. I don't see it as such, but a lot of people do. And so that's why I think, you know, you look at like Amazon, they don't do a ton of horror, you know, I think because they kind of see it as maybe not right for the brand or whatever. And so I think the tricky thing is executives in town maybe aren't themselves fan of horror, so they're not looking to do a horror film. That's the one obstacle I think that comes up for horror, but people tend to always be looking for high concept horror, action, sci-fi, thriller. Those are the things that people are actually looking for, and to be fair, have been looking for many, many years. So I don't feel like anything I'm saying here is news.
Yeah. That's dope. All right, let's take it back a little bit. What do you look for in writers when you sign them? And are you like, do contests matter to you?
I see contests as a great way for me to potentially be exposed to talented writers. I read for a number of them. I feel like I read for Screencraft, Austin, Script Pipeline, other ones that I'm Final Draft. So I read for them, and I purely, if I'm reading someone and I really like it, like I just met with someone this week who had sent me I read this thing called Killer Shorts, and myself and my colleague met with a writer that I read like 4 years ago because I really liked their short, and then we stayed in touch, and they sent me a feature version of it recently and really liked it, so we're talking.
That's dope.
So, it exposes me to people. I will say that, like, someone's like, hey, I won this, or I won that. Like, that doesn't necessarily, just because you won something doesn't mean I'm going to read it per se. But it might mean that I'll look at the logline a little more closely. But, it also depends on the festival. Someone emailed me something. They're like, I won the main horror period category.
Iced coffee.
Right. They're like, I won best war film at the main whatever. And I'm like, okay. Like, it's like this within this within this. And I'm like, okay, it has to be one of the bigger ones for me to really pay attention to it. But conversely, really what I'm paying attention to is the log line. I don't care if you want a film festival or not. If you've done 0 film festivals and you have an amazing log line, I'm requesting it. So, they're helpful in that way. And I found a lot of people in particular from Script Pipeline who are very good about always, Matt Misetich over there, very good about sending me, and have sent me great writers who become clients and friends and stuff like that. But
what makes a logline jump out at you? What makes a great logline?
It's hard to say. It's kind of the same thing as like what makes a great pop song, right? You're like, you just know it when you hear it, I would say if I have to really science it, I would say sometimes, and Save the Cat talks about this, there can be a contradiction inherent in the logline, this, but this, but it just seems cool. I remember, so my client Alad Ziv wrote a script called Court 17, which was originally called Loser when he sent it to me, which is not my favorite title for the concept, which is why we ended up changing it.
But you look past the title.
Right, and the logline was, I mean, it's funny, he was like, by the way, I'm former roommates with this guy who introduced you to your wife. I was like, okay, that's interesting. I don't think anyone else is going to be able to
This guy
to
who
do
what?
That. So my client Alad used to live with this guy called Eric Dickinson, and Eric is the person who introduced me to my wife. And so he was like,
read that
you
email.
have to.
I mean, I probably was going to...
You don't have to read the script, but you at least got to pay attention to
I did, yeah, exactly. He's like, I know Eric Dickinson.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, interesting. And so
when you got to that log line.
Well, the log line was, and I'm going to butcher it. It's the same log line that ended up it was number 2 in the blacklist a couple of years ago. The log line was something, basically the way, I'll just pitch it the way that I pitch it to people, which is, it's a kind of like a female tennis pro, professional player coming to the kind of the end of her career, and she ends up playing the best player in the world, who is like 18, 19, super young, reminds her of a younger version of herself, gets completely destroyed, wakes up the next day, it's the same exact day. And so she has to find a way to beat the best player in the world. And that idea was really, it almost felt like a video game to me, in the sense of like, or just this idea that you sometimes have, which is like, wow, if I did a million loops, could I figure out how to like become the best UFC fighter in the world? Or fight someone, because I would just learn there. But like, oh, you always cock your head to the left when you punch right, or like a punch out or something.
No, you're right.
And so that was a really interesting concept. I was like, oh, that's intriguing to me. I feel like that's kind of, the phrase is sticky, essentially. It sticks with you. I remember like just thinking about it weeks after I'd kind of read it. I was like, wow, that feels, and tennis was so perfect because a team sport, you have to rely on other people, but in tennis, it's one-on-one. And so it's like, okay, can you, even though this person's younger than you and faster, can you beat this person on a purely mental level? So that was really interesting. You kind of were asking what I look for in clients. And so what I always say is it starts with talent and the writing talent and the writing ability. And that's simply like, did you write a cool, is your concept cool? And like people are like, oh, I'm not really good at writing log lines, but hopefully a cool concept can survive a mediocre log line. Although I would say like writing a log line is part of writing. I think there, if you come up with a great concept / log line that hooks me into reading your screenplay, and then is the screenplay good? And then if the screenplay is good, I'm going to want to meet with you. So then that's the writing talent element of it. So then I get in the room with the person or over Zoom or whatever the situation is. And I'm talking to them, and what I'm looking for then is like, are they driven? Are they focused on this as a job, or this is kind of a hobby for them? You know, and honestly, to be fair, that can sometimes be a little bit tricky to tell. But you know, you can kind of be like, how much have they written before? Like, I'm not obsessed with someone having, like, my wife really broke through with Blonde Ambition. That was the first script she ever wrote. You know, so like, I'm not as obsessed with like, you have to written 3 or 4 screenplays for me to even consider you.
But if you wrote 100, I'm like, oh shit, I don't know.
Well, yeah, some people. I mean, what really throws me is people are like, hello, this is my TV show. I've written 3 seasons of it. You know, true story. They're like, I've written 22 episodes this season, and I've got like 66 episodes written, and I'm like, that's a little weird. You know,
it's a little intense.
Maybe you should have spent your time on a different concept. People are so obsessed with writing. Sometimes they don't think about like that. Coming up with a concept is writing onto itself. So you know, your drive, your kind of professionalism. That's what I'm looking at. I'm also looking at honestly who you are in the room, and like whether that's the Zoom room or the actual physical room. Are you a collaborative person? Do I enjoy being in the room with you? What I want is them to come out of the room and Saeed, I know this happens with you, so I'm going to brag about you for a second. Which is, I know when people get in the room with Saeed, they go, "Oh man, I got to find a way to work with him. How do I work with him?" You know, and that's what you want with a client is when they get in a room with someone that because the writing gets them in the room. The executive likes their screenplay, same as I do, and if they get in the room, they're like, "Wow, I like this person. I want to find a way to work with this person. I trust this person." Because writing isn't. You can write an amazing screenplay, and then the next one could be terrible. It almost is like the executive has to like believe in you, right? You can have a great take and then you fumble it, you know? So they're kind of like trusting you in a way. And, you know, and so, which is tricky because so often writers are like, well, I'm like Charlie Kaufman, I'm bad in a room. And like, you have to be so good to overcome that. And that's just how screenwriting is. It's not like novels. It's not like plays. Like there is an element of collaboration, and not that there isn't with plays, but like there's an element of selling, I suppose. And selling that you are the person to solve the problem, and that's to some degree why the money is so good. You know, because if you do get in there, they're paying you a lot of money and they're hoping that you solve their problem. You know, and so I'm looking for, is this a person? I remember talking to someone, and you know, I can't remember how exactly we got onto it. This is a true story. They started like dissing my wife's script. They're like, I mean, Blonde Ambition wasn't that good, and she still got a career. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, anyways, talk to you. But I'm also like, if you're that bad socially, just with me, you're first person.
Done no research.
God knows. No, he had done the research.
He knew.
He knew.
Yeah, he knew. Oh, so he was like negging you.
I'm like, that's bad on all levels.
Right.
Like,
oh no, yeah. He was
and you never talk down because you never know. Just advice for writers out there: you never talk down on any movie or anything in a introductory meeting, because you don't know if that executive worked on that picture or produced that movie. There's been times where I met an executive and they end up producing some movie a year ago that has nothing to do with the job they have right now. So if I walk in there and I'm like, yeah, you know, I hate that piece of shit ass movie. It's like, oh, that's the end of the meeting right there.
I mean, it won't be. They'll just like smile at you.
And then you'll never get
exactly. I mean, like, if we want to get in real trouble with Twitter site, I mean, like, you know, our like Sean's advice, which is, you know, don't be a jerk, you know, on Twitter. Like,
Twitter too.
That's one of those things is like, if you're out there, you know, and you're like being like, this movie is so terrible, everyone involved is a moron. And then like, by the way, like people like search out reviews. They search out reviews and they remember them. I don't know if you saw this, but Eva Mendes, when Ryan Gosling got an Oscar nom, she posted up like this article that was like, what a how Ken looks from Rolling Stone. That was, and she circled certain lines she didn't like. Like she had kept those receipts from like a year ago or 2 years, however long it was, you know, and she sat on them waiting, you know,
for the opportune time.
Trust me, that people are searching their movie on Twitter and other places, and when you don't remember, the crazy thing is you don't remember the good reviews, you just remember the bad reviews,
for sure.
You know. And to be blunt, you know, I never told anyone this, but when someone talks a lot of, not necessarily shit on me, or someone's just, when people are saying things that I personally think are like super weird, I'll mute them because I don't want to hear them. And then if I'm like down, because I just don't want them in my feed. And then like if someone says to me, I'm like, oh, who is this person? I'm like, why is her name familiar? I'm like, oh, I muted them. I'm like,
they get back.
Maybe something going on with this person, right? Because that is one of those things where, like, you know, you are looking for people who are going to. I represent my clients, but my clients also represent me.
True. Yeah.
You know, and so it's one of those things where if people are talking a lot of shit.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, two writers talking shit, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? But if they're being, you know, I'm not saying that people can't have constructive conversations.
Yeah.
But when people are being aggressively nasty, it's just like, you know, it's a very weird thing to do.
I always tell people, like, look, I talk about shit I like. I don't have time to talk about shit I don't
exactly
like. Like, you know what I'm saying?
If
like,
I'm talking about something, I like to promote the things that I feel really excited about. Yeah. If I don't like something,
why am I wasting energy?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And on top of that, it about just how they track it. I remember when I got on Flatbush, I literally was like a fan of the show, so I talked about it maybe 6 months before I got staffed, and they were like, "Yeah, we researched." Because in the interview I was like, "Yeah, I know the show because I've already been a fan of it," and they're like, "Oh yeah, we already checked that." Yeah. And I'm like, holy shit. Good thing I didn't say, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, but by the way, like, that's the kind of thing you would do to someone if you were dating them.
Or a job.
Or, like, yeah, if I'm going to hire someone, I'm, like, definitely checking them.
They do background checks.
By the way, you get in trouble. Like, think about it. I hire someone and they've said incredibly offensive things, or they're, you know, yelling at people, or they're whatever. People like, that's representing me, you know? As they're like, wow, how can you stand behind this person? You know? I'm like, oh my gosh.
Also, it's like every thought you have doesn't need to be expressed online.
Yeah,
you could just keep it to yourself. You could write in your diary.
That's what I would say. People treat Twitter like it's live journal. You know, and they're just like, today I had a really awful day, and then I had to see the face of that actor who I hate. Why don't they just die?
Oh my god!
You know, and you're like, oh my goodness.
And then 5 years later, they're trying to get a movie set up with that actor, and there you have it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's you know, it's one of those things. It's also just negativity, and also no one sets out to make a bad movie or a bad TV show or whatever. Yeah. And I remember when I was just an intern in this industry, I was like, yeah, I saw that movie. Man, those guys wrote that script. What a piece of crap that was. And the executive, Sam Dickerman, who's now a VP at Disney, was like, sat me down. He's like, if a movie's not good, never blame the writers. Right. He's like, it's either the director's fault, or the chain of blame is like either the director or the actor, depending on who's more important. In the movie, they had the most power over it. And then you go down, and then it's either the actor or the director, and then it goes to the studio, then it goes to the producer, and it's like the bottom is the writer. You know, let alone, by the way, the writer. Now that I've worked on a bunch of movies, it's like the writer who gets credited is not necessarily, they might have not touched the script in 2 years. You know?
Facts.
Yeah,
that's another thing. Like, sometimes you'll see those names, or somebody's name might not be on something. I remember I met with Joe Robert Cole, and he was like, he did a lot of that writing on that Atlanta movie that had T.I. in them back in the day.
Like, oh my God, that movie?
Like, I was just like, it was funny because it was like, my name wasn't credited, but I did a lot. Because I was asking him, like, where'd you come from, kind of? Right. And he was like, man, I wrote this movie.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, because he was on OJ. He was on OJ. But I remember he was like, bro, I wrote that Atlanta movie. And I was like, wow, I didn't even see your name on there. But anyhow, that's...
I mean, it's funny because I always talk about that with my wife because, like, you know, it's like, she's never on the blacklist and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, she just wrote Freaky Friday 2 and all that kind of stuff. Tight. But, like, you can have a long career and that's when you get things made. And people are like, well, what happened to this person? It's like, they are working steadily. You just don't know because you're not in the business necessarily.
The business knows, but the people may not.
Absolutely.
Okay, so with your clients, when your client brings you like new material, let's say they're like, okay, I've got this great idea for a pilot, like I'm going to go ahead and write it out. Like, how do you determine like this is just going to be a sample for you versus like this is going to be a show we're going to take out and pitch?
I mean, look, you want to treat everything like it's a show that you could take out and pitch on a theoretical level. You do, you know. I mean, like more practically, if the person is like never staffed before, if they're like staff writer, story writer level, it's going to be an uphill battle. Yeah. But you never know, right? You just kind of, it's like you write different things for different needs. You know, I have a more established client, and he's kind of worked in kind of more network TV, broadcast TV most of his career. So we're trying to work on kind of what we call the out of the box sample. You know, the crazy sample, the thing that can get him on cable shows, you know, streaming shows, because he's got a lot of kind of more straight ahead samples. He doesn't have that out of the box sample because he's mostly worked, and so you're kind of like, what is the purpose of this stuff? But I think in a theoretical world, you're always designing something to potentially sell. You know, like why not, right? Like why undercut yourself? But you know, it's really about the idea and like how many places that it could actually get done for. You know, if it's like a period thing, that's going to be an uphill battle. You know, that is always always the hardest thing to get going is a period show, but then they make them sometimes, you
Right.
know? And so all you can ever really attack something from is how do we make this as interesting as possible to read and start from there, you know? And I think that's the thing that I feel like is rarely talked about enough is really pushing yourself on a conceptual level and being like, we got to keep pushing. How do we make this more interesting? How do we make this more interesting? And not settle for good enough. And that's the thing that's going to really push your writing forward. But people just think, oh, I just keep rewriting. I write more, like typing. I'm just typing. And it's like, no, you have to.
I'm typing.
Well, but like people think like, oh, I did 10 pages today. I did 7 pages today.
Yeah.
Cool, but were they good?
Yeah, facts.
You know, for me, it's like, if you're driving, are you driving towards the right destination?
Yeah.
And for that, we spend a lot of time I do with my clients being like, is this the idea that's interesting enough? Or is this iteration of the idea interesting enough? You know, we were working on something recently. It's actually a project that we talked about when we went to dinner in Austin. And then the trailer for a new movie came out and it was very similar.
I was about to ask.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And we were like, uh-oh. And so we're having to completely like...
pivot slightly?
Yeah, I mean, we're taking certain elements, but we're pivoting it completely away from there.
Good.
You know?
Yeah.
Because we're like, oh, somebody already like smoked us. And honestly, slightly a more interesting version of that, you know? And you're like, okay, so we have to pivot, you know? But you're always pushing yourself to is this the most interesting version of this idea?
I agree.
And I think that thinking, that being like, oh, have I focused on the most interesting main character? Have I focused on the most interesting, you know, dynamic, all that kind of stuff. That goes because you're not seeing it. There's not like 10 pages out in front of you. It's more like theoretical. It doesn't get lauded as much as you know I wrote 10 pages today does, you know. But I think it's as important, and honestly it might be more important, because I think if you have an amazing concept, the pages flow a bit more easily than if you have something kind of more familiar, more generic, you know. And you know that's I think that's what we're really focusing on when we're working with my clients is we're trying to get everything to be as good as possible. I mean, everything's a sample and everything's potentially a pilot, you know. I mean, like famously, Sean Ryan wrote The Shield as a sample. He's like, oh, I'll write at the end of it, this cop shoots another cop. The lead cop shoots another cop. He's like, I just wanted to write a balls out sample that would get me, you know, attention, because I'd never seen that before. He's like, never in my million years did I think someone would actually want to make it. Yeah. You know. Mad Men was originally just a sample. Wow. I mean, like, I think that's not to say Matt Weiner didn't want to get it.
No, he wanted HBO to pick it up, but they passed.
Right. Well, I'm saying I was post Sopranos.
Right.
That got him onto Sopranos.
Yeah.
So think about how long Mad Men was on.
He had it for like...
from when he wrote it.
10 years or something. Yeah, 8 or 10 years before it got
Exactly. So this is my thing, is everything in the right situation becomes something. Yeah. You know?
Oh, that's a great quote. We're using that. Also, how much material are you looking for from a writer per year? So let's say TV writer and feature writer.
I'd say a feature writer, I'd love to get at least one feature a year. Yep. At least. Yep. TV writer, one pilot a year. Cool. 2 would be great. Yeah. 2 would be great, and I think it's more doable than 2 features a year. Sure. But I'll tell you what, I'd rather one amazing pilot than 2 okay pilots.
Listen, I hear you. All right, so another thing is one thing I run into with writers, and you briefly talked about it for a second, is like writers are always like, why do managers say my pilot will not sell? Is this like, because some of them are like, I write a pilot and the manager's like, all right, look, this is not going to sell, but we're going to use it as a sample.
It's interesting. I had an iteration of a conversation like that. It actually wasn't me saying it, was the agent saying it. Yeah. And I think what they're trying to do in that situation is set expectations properly. I mean, look, all reps do all day long is talk to producers and talk to buyers. Well, what are you looking for? What are you looking for? So we have a decent sense when you're like, hey, I've written this thing. I mean, for me, I'm pretty involved with my clients in terms of their concepts and the process. So it's rare to me that it'll be when the script is done, it's the first time they're hearing of it, you know? It's really, you know, if they're working on something, I'll be telling them very early on, hey, this is an uphill battle to actually getting this done. Yeah. But in terms of why, I think they're setting expectations low.
Yeah.
Maybe they supersede them, and maybe sometimes the reason they're saying that is because they don't love the pilot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what they're trying to say in a polite way. Is I'm not going to take this out super wide because I don't think it's as strong as your last. Here's the thing: if you're an executive and you read a pilot from someone and you thought, wow, this is great, I love this is so amazing, and you're putting on all the writers list, and then another pilot comes in and she's not as good as the last pilot. Mm-hmm. You're like, maybe this guy isn't as good as the writers I thought he was. Mm-hmm. Right? Why disabuse? Mm-hmm. And so that might be what's going on. Mm-hmm. And you can be like, well, that's not true. It's even better, right? But they have to make a judgment call.
Everything new was better.
Right. And so I think that might be what's going on. It's hard to say. Every situation is kind of different. But I think they're either setting expectations low because they don't believe it fits what the marketplace is looking for based on their conversations, which, to be fair, that's what they do all day. That's a big difference between reps and writers. Is what we do all day is talk to the people who are looking to buy material, and writers more often will talk to one. They're like, I want hiking, and they said everybody wants rom-coms now, and they're like, and they put it on Twitter and they get like 10,000 likes
from another writer friend.
Or like 10, and they talk to another exective, and then 10,000 likes on Twitter, and they're like, rom-coms are back, and you're like, yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody, but okay. But yeah, that's all we do all day long, because that's the job. I viewed, like, you don't have to read the trades. If you don't want to, if you do, great. But my job is to read everything, to talk to everybody, so you don't have to. Yeah. But then also it might be that your script isn't as good as the last one. And that's why, and they're trying to find a polite way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Before we come around to the end, I definitely want to ask you, because Bellevue is definitely always in the year-end blacklist, which is writers, biggest
obsession.
Yes, like every writer, it's three things they want: manager, blacklist, staffed on the show.
Oh, and also like a top-tier agent, so we would nice.
Yeah,
so they can put in their Twitter bio.
That too, but I will say, even
if you don't have it in your Twitter bio, are you really wrapped?
That's a good point.
Says to go check his Twitter bio.
Yeah, I'm like, oh shit, I think I don't have anything in mind. But can you briefly talk about the Blonde Ambition, like the idea, the tune, and how you went about it?
Specifically, the Blonde Ambition.
Yeah.
I'll do the short version, which is when I went to film school at NYU. I took a music class. I think it's just a music class with a great journalist, writer, author called Nelson George.
Fire, I know.
Yeah, you know Nelson.
Sure.
Yeah, amazing. I took the class twice. That's how much I liked Nelson. And just an amazing guy. And so he brought in, this is back in like 99, 2000, he brought in, or it could have been 2001, I took the class twice, and he brought in Jelly Bean Benitez. And Jelly Bean Benitez was a huge DJ in the 80s, and he had, I would not have known this, he'd not come in, he had become he had worked on a kind of remix of Madonna's first album, brought on the song Holiday, worked on song Holiday, and then also he and Madonna started dating, and then eventually they'd broken up. And there was just something about the way he talked about it that really struck me as kind of almost a Star is Born kind of thing, although obviously with the tragedy. And it always stuck in my brain. Cut to like almost 20 years later, like 15 years later or so, and Elise and I are dating, and we're talking about cool ideas, and I was like, maybe Madonna, and she's like, oh, well, what about Madonna exactly? And I was like, well, when I was at film school and I told the Jelly Bean Benitez thing, she's like, oh, that's interesting. And so she started doing the research, and she it took her a couple of years to write the script, maybe at least a year and a half. And because she had a day job, she was working as an assistant at Universal Pictures, and then she was working as an assistant on Fresh Off the Boat. And this is back when she was like in her mid-20s, and she, her friends were all going out and partying, and she was staying in on a lunch break. She was staying in on weekends and writing her outline, doing her research, writing the script, So we finally took it in 2016. We took it into the marketplace. And I remember telling my now in-laws, because Elise is my wife, I was like, yeah, we're never selling that because we don't control Madonna's life rights. We don't have her music.
Yeah, of course.
And they're like, well, then what you work on it for? I'm like, well, it's going to get Elise on the blacklist to get her a lot of notice and maybe help her get staffed on like, a TV show. And then it took off way beyond our wildest dreams, and Mike DeLuca came on to produce it, and they ended up selling it to Universal. Universal bought it, which is really amazing. That kind of launched her career. And since then, she worked on a lot more music movies as well, but since a lot of other stuff, most recently Freaky Friday too. So yeah, it was kind of this crazy journey where. And I even got into the part of it where Madonna, when they came on the trades, Madonna started attacking Elise by name on her Instagram and calling her a snake. Oh my God. That was the week of our wedding. Oh my God! So yeah, it was a really, really, really crazy time.
Well, you've done something good when you kicked the hornet's nest.
It's funny because there's a part in the script where. Madonna is reading about Cher basically disses Madonna, which really happened in real life.
Yeah.
And her boyfriend's like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And Madonna just turns and goes, "Yeah, Cher knows my name." Damn. And Nahnatchka Khan, who had been Elise's boss at Fresh Off the Boat, and when she was friendly, was close with, she was reading the script, and she's like, "I was reading that, and I was like, oh my God, Madonna knows your name, Elise."
Right.
That's it's kind of this full circle kind of situation. Way. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, and that script still has a lot of fans around town to this day, and kind of really launched her career.
Fire. All right, last question. What are 5 scripts that you think upcoming writers should read, TV or film?
That's a really good question, and the sad truth is I don't really read a lot of stuff that isn't my client's material anymore.
Good question.
And so what I end up recommending to people is really based on what we're working on. Like I remember recently, we're working on this kind of dark film noir with an unreliable, with a protagonist who's a very unreliable ally, and so I'm a huge fan of Devil in a Blue Dress. Fire. So I had him watch the movie and read the screenplay because Mouse is one of the great characters of all time. I'm still shocked they haven't made a TV show out of that. Just sucks. I guess the period aspect makes it hard, but still, come on. Easy Rollins.
That should be amazing.
Easy Rollins. Let's do that. So, that was like a specific one. Michael Clayton's one I go back to. I think Tony Gilroy's writing style is truly inspirational. That's one that I think about a lot. I'm trying to think of the stuff that I wrote when I was trying to be a writer, and the OC pilot I always felt was really clean. On the comedy side, My Name is Earl. That is a really clean way into a very high concept. I feel like the show's kind of been forgotten a little bit, but that had a really
they don't reboot it. Don't even worry about it.
I'm sure they're gonna.
Don't even worry about it.
It's really, I think if you want to be a writer in particular genre, if you're working on something, I always like my clients, if we're working on something, I want them to steep themselves in all the things that are around. Listen to the music, watch the movies, read the screenplays, and almost through a process of osmosis, kind of, consciously or subconsciously kind of, be like, I was watching this, and what if we did we flipped that on it and we attacked it this way, So that's, I always talk to people. I'm like, look at the fight scene in the first Born Identity, and we should not the movie. I mean, the movie, yes, but the screenplay. But like, look at how it's written, and how do we find a way to kind of attack things that way? Or hey, check out this scene and that, or that. And that. For me, that's what it's about: is looking at the specific situations or the specific references for your screenplay. So I wish I had like, hey, every writer should read this, but
that was good enough. Where can people follow you? And I'm sure they'll find you to send queries because you get so many all the time. But where are you at?
I am, for my sins, as you know, on Twitter, John Zaozirny. I don't accept anyone on Instagram because that's just me putting up, as you probably know, just me putting up endless photos of my daughter.
I love those photos, by the way.
I know, she's a star.
She is.
And then, if you're looking to send a query to us, that email address, info@BellevueProds, that's on our website, that's the way to do the query stuff. But again, if you have any questions, if people have questions for me,
you usually tweet about it. Like
they can hit me up on Twitter, or they can just talk about me on Reddit, and I'll find it. Like
answer it on Twitter the next time.
I'll find it 3 months later or something when I decide when there's nothing going on Twitter, and I decide to check Reddit to see if people are shit talking to me.
Oh my God!
Look, we appreciate it. We're going to have to get you back for part 2, maybe even with Zach. That'll be interesting. And Mel, another good episode.
Another great episode. Don't send a query on
us.
Christmas.
And to us. Please, don't send a query on Christmas, and don't send it to us.
Yeah.
But
do rate us 5 stars.
Yes, because.
And also leave us a rave review.
Yes.
People aren't leaving reviews. They're not rating 5 stars, and they need to get on top of it.
Listen, people out there, please write a review. It helps us in the algorithm of whatever this stuff is. All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Two Writers Talking Shit is an original podcast created by Melanie Mars and Saeed Crumpler. Our producer is Kayla Guess. Our audio engineer is T. Kelly.
Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you damn well please. All we ask is that you subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and give us a glowing review.
If you're not going to give us 5 stars or any glowing reviews, then why even log on? Save your rants for an open mic.
If you have any questions for us, and I do mean any, you can email us at twowriterstalkingshit@gmail.com. That's the number 2, and then writerstalkingshit@gmail.com.
See you next episode.
Bye.